Hello and welcome to another episode of Cards Subject to Change. As always, I am your co-host, the Wizard CZ. With me, as always, my tag team partner, Nick Bull. Nick, how are you tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm just waiting to get elevated off the dark card and onto the card, so I could be subject to change. But until then, I'm ready, willing, and able.
Hey, I'm right there with you. We didn't really have a big week, in my opinion, in the modern world of wrestling. Don't think there's anything we really need to mention. So I say we just jump right in. We're talking about the Battle of the Belts, the Clash of the Champions, doing kind of a compare and contrast, and just reviewing some old matches. I say we just jump right in.
Yeah, let's jump right in. But in jumping in, let's review this a little bit so the viewers know so the millions and millions of listeners out there know the Clash of the Champions. Different format, obviously, than Battle of the Belts. Back in the day, Clash of the Champions used to be 2.5 hours. So it was a much bigger program, obviously more matches on the card. I do want people to know that ahead of time before we jump down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Battle of the Belts only an hour long. Uh, Honestly, I could go for it to be a little bit longer, but there's other issues too, and we'll get into that.
Hey, I'm ready. Let's go down the rabbit hole.
So where do you want to start? This is your show, boss. Where are we going?
My show. I'm going to tell you, Clash of the I'm going to tell you, hey, what brings us to wrestling and stuff. I have a soft spot in my heart for the Clash of the Champions, and here's why. I didn't have cable until I was in high school, and I was always a WWF guy growing up. So I really didn't know a lot about this. And I broke into watching WCW before Nitro really took off, and it was a Clash match, a match I didn't review, but it was Jushin Thunder Liger against Flying Brian Pillman. I believe it was like Clash 32 or 33.
That had to be an outstanding match.
Absolutely. It was amazing. And I was just like, I kind of wanted more. And I was like, this is WCW. This is before Pillman came over to WWF. I was like, okay. So the Clashes for me really introduced me into WCW. And of course, the old ones, what was going on with the NWA, since that's who WCW was partnered with at the time. So I love the Clashes. I know I said, hey, I'm going to watch this one, that one, whatever. I said I was going to watch 5, but I knew I've already seen it. I wanted you to watch that, get a set of virgin eyes on it, and to see, given your thoughts. You probably seen some in the past, but not have watched one recently. So I had you watch 5, and on my part, I watched Clash 9, Clash 17, and then all 3 of the Battle of the Belts. So you point the mouse where you want it to go, click on it, and that's where we're going to go.
Well, I think we should start off just by voicing our opinion on Battle of the Belts, because I see a lot of potential for that show, but I don't think Tony Khan has it there yet, and I don't know if he's going to get it there.
Yeah, I'm going to try and be. I'm going to treat.
So I don't have a way to go back right now to watch the other 2. I saw the most recent one. The matches were decent, pretty good for the Claudio match, especially on the 3rd one. But yeah, go ahead. I jumped on you there. Go ahead. Say what.
No, you didn't jump on me one bit. I don't know if they know what they want to do with these yet. Just a little background: the Battle of the Belts. It is what TNT is giving AEW, or gave AEW. So 4 hourly specials a year. This is them kind of saying, hey, we're sorry we kicked you off TNT. AEW was on TNT. They got moved over to TBS because TNT won the NHL hockey bidding contract. So pro wrestling here takes a back seat. They go over on TBS, which historically that's where wrestling's always been, the 505, the TBS Superstation. So that's kind of where it's at. Is kind of back to its roots. But the Battle of the Belts, to me, and what they're missing. And this is the negative thing I'll say, and then we're not going to be negative tonight, is AEW needs to use the Battle of the Belts just like WCW used to use the Clash of Champions, and that was to build the next show. Okay? When I'm watching Battle of the Belts, not much is really being built, in my opinion. They're having matches, but nothing's being built, no programs. Let's use these 4 Battle of the Belts on months that we don't have pay-per-views and kind of treat them like pay-per-views and maybe pitch it that way to TNT, maybe they can throw an extra hour your way and you can turn it into a 2-hour show pitching your pay-per-view. Because I know you're going to kind of see where I'm coming from with this. When you watched Clash 5, I believe you watched Clash 1 and Clash 5. I don't want to speak for you.
Yeah, and I watched a couple others.
They're pushing the next pay-per-view, right?
Yeah, they're pushing the next big show. Like Clash 5, the big thing coming up was the Chi-Town Rumble and the match between Steamboat and Flair. And they're pushing that heavy. All through the show, you've got interviews with Steamboat and Flair. You've got a big segment in the ring. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I couldn't agree more. I think Battle of the Belts has that potential to be a big show. But what it lacked for me was the lack of build, for sure. They're just throwing matches at us like, hey, you want to see these guys, right? So here they are. They've got to have some kind of bigger build and bigger story, and it's got to have that big fight feel. When I watched Clash 1, after having watched Battle of the Belts 3 recently, it was worlds of difference. Like, even just the start of it, right off the get-go, they're promoting the whole show. It's got that big fight feel, and you're invested right at the beginning of that first Clashes of Champions. I didn't feel that way at Battle of the Belts. I tuned in. It was like, okay, here are the matches, and there was no investment for me. Other than, obviously, I'm a big Claudio fan, and I'm glad he's the Ring of Honor World Champion.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I can hear the frustration in your voice, and I think the same frustration I share. You know, to me, from the outside looking in, just looks like, let's throw 3 matches on there, and we can tape it during Rampage. I wish they treated it more special, treated it to like a 90-minute or 2-hour show, and taped it and shot it live. I know that's probably a pain in the butt or whatever production-wise, but that would go back to giving it the big fight feel, almost anything can happen type of deal that the Clashes used to have back in the day.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Even that extra 30 minutes and a little bit of build for your matches would excuse me, would be great. It would make it so much better, in my opinion. It would elevate that show to the level that I think it has the potential to be at, maybe even higher.
Oh, no doubt. And not everything that Battle of the Belts has done is bad. Okay, they've been 3 of them. They have 3 matches on each show. So there's been 9 matches total, and I'm looking back here at my notes. The Ring of Honor belt has been defended twice. The women's belt has been defended on all 3 shows. The TNT belt has been defended on all 3 shows, as it should be. And then in there, you do have a FTW title offense, which, tongue-in-cheek, haha, I get it, but it's not a real title. So for that to take up the spot of another match that could have happened that had a real belt opposed to it, fine. But not every match has to have a title on the line, as you will see on the Clash of the Champions. Not every match has a title. But for the most part, it's been the women's, the TNT, and now if that's how they're going to feature the Ring of Honor, that's fine. And that'd be great if they're going to be a constant on the Battle of the Belts, because they don't have that TV deal yet that they're looking for.
No, and I'm anxious for that day to happen, and I agree. I think it's a great showcase for the Ring of Honor title, but I also think that AEW has so many title belts in their repertoire that just having an hour card with a 3-hour show with a 3-match card just doesn't give it what it needs. And I would love to see that extra half hour to an hour where you can get more matches, and not necessarily with titles. Like you said, we've both watched a handful of Clashes this week. Seeing you don't have to have a title match for every match of the show. It's not like the WWE and their bastardized version of Clash of Champions where every title is on the line.
Bastardized, homogenized, pasteurized.
Exactly. And that's not knocking WWE. They've had some great shows with that Clash of Champions banner, but it's not the same as when it was NWA, when it was WCW. And I'll just jump in. So I watched four. I
Yeah,
watched,
I think we're done with Battle of the Belt talk. You want to go back and just a brief rundown of matches. The last match with Claudio and Konosuke Keshka was probably the best match that we've seen in the short history of Battle Belts. Sammy Guevara has been on the first two shows as TNT champion, has put on a couple solid performances, but there really hasn't been that standout match for the Clash, as we'll talk about later.
right, right. I can agree with that. Having looked back at the Battle of the Belts, but not seeing two of them, I can agree. Uh, what really drew me in, so same as you, I watched 9, I watched 17. We'll get to those. First one I watched, I just started right at the beginning. We're gonna watch
Yep.
Clash number 1,
Yep.
and bam, right off the get go here, it's got some great matches. You look at the card, you've got some surefire Hall of Famers. You got Mike Rotunda starting off against Jimmy Garvin for the NWA World Title or World Television Title. I'm sorry. Dusty Rhodes is on the card. The Road Warriors, obviously Flair and Sting, and that match, that main event, blew me away. Flair and Sting, you can't go wrong when you put those two together, no matter what you're doing. And a 45-minute time limit draw that went to the judges, and the judges say, "Yep, it's a draw." Thanks for at the end of that. So I'm not sure how I feel about the judges concept in wrestling. I'm a little on the fence about that. I get where they're going. Not necessarily my thing. If it's going to be a time limit draw, let it be a time limit draw. We don't need 3 people telling us that.
Right.
But it's one of those matches where you just look at it, and they tell such a great story between Flair and Sting, and there was build to it. There were things before that happened that led to this match.
I
And there's
love
so
it.
many.
I
Go ahead.
love you mentioned Flair Sting because who fought in the last match on Nitro's history in WCW?
Flair and Sting, absolutely.
Flair and Sting, correct?
Yes,
So
sir.
it goes full circle, right?
And really, those two were the faces of WCW. Yeah, sure. Hulk Hogan came in '94, and he led the way especially when he transitioned into the NWO, Hollywood Hogan. But you look back at the history of WCW and even the NWA before it, Sting and Flair are the people you go to first when you talk about it. There are some other great names that can be put at that top pinnacle of the era. I mean, Lex Luger, I can't not mention him. He's a multi-time world champion. Ricky Steamboat, which we'll get to. So much, so much potential. So many great stars, and first ballot Hall of Famers, as I like to say, coming out of the Clash of the Champions era, and all the programs they put out from A to Z. And watching this week, just going to put it out there. I'm inspired. I'm going to go back, and I'm probably going to watch them all 1 through, what is it, 35?
It is. It becomes a challenging task because I'm in the midst of it, and I probably started over a year ago because the Clash did such a good job, and it ended so. A lot of them ended so controversially and dramatically that I wanted to see what happened at the pay per view. So I'll go watch the pay per view before I go watch the next Clash. So it's kind of a double rabbit hole. It's going to take you extra long because you'll get drawn into most of those to want to see what happened at Starrcade or at Halloween Havoc or whatever. So it could be dangerous.
Well, hey, you know me. I'm all about reliving nostalgia, and that is not danger to me. That is just awesomeness waiting to happen. That's how I'm going to put that.
You will not regret it one bit. And maybe a year from now, look back on this episode and be like, you know what? We need to do another episode on the Clash because there's just so much to talk about.
I can see that. There's a lot of potential, and just the four that I watched, we could fill 24 hours talking about just the four that I've watched and the ones that you've watched, I'm sure, if we really let ourselves ramble.
We could, but we do have to stay on task. But I'm glad you broke in with the first one. I've seen Clash 1, and I really can't go back and say anything more than what you did. For having your first show, having it be very memorable, you end with a rivalry that's going to be in your headlines for several years to come. So made a lot of sense. It's cool, and for nostalgia's sake, it's definitely worth going back and watching.
Yeah, and that's one that because of the caliber of the event, I'd go back and I'd watch it again. And I'm not right away. I'll probably go when I start my run through the Clash, just ease right into Clash 2. I don't know if I'll rewatch the ones that I've already watched while I'm going through them. Probably not, but the four that I've seen, they're all worth going back for sure. Excuse me. So you had me watch 5.
Yes, sir.
And I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of great stuff, a lot of big names on 5. You've got it starts off hot. You got the Midnight Express with one of my favorite managers, Jim Cornette, carrying around his world famous tennis racket. Kind of an unknown team. Well, not necessarily unknown, but not really a big team that they're facing in the Russian Assassins, the nameless Russian Assassins. Though I'm sure you could look up who's under the masks.
And those masks look more like bondage masks than wrestling masks.
They really did. I thought the match was pretty decent. Had a good amount of time. Honestly, just looking, I've got my cheat sheet up. I'm looking at the card. Lex Luger stands out with me. You've got him against the Blackmailer, who will later become the Super Destroyer and many other variations therein. That was pretty decent. What stands out to me the most about Clash 5 are two things. The first one is the big thing that's going on in NWA, in WCW at the time, and that is Steamboat Flair. We're right in the middle of their big 3-match rivalry. There's not a match between them on this card, which I'm okay with. It's got me inspired to go watch the Chi-Town Rumble because I know their trilogy is just outstanding. But what stands out, the middle of the show, after they've both had an interview piece, you've got them both in the ring, and Steamboat just lays into Flair. He's got the super expensive suit on, but not for very long. They end up brawling. Flair's in his underwear. Steamboat runs Flair off, and what really popped me the most was when Steamboat goes back in the ring and he starts putting on Flair's ripped up, expensive sports jacket and everything and tie. I took a picture for the Twitter page, and I sent that out to the world of Steamboat in the suit, in the sports jacket. And I'm like, we're gearing up to go in the studio. We're watching Clash right now. So that was just a great moment for me. And I thought it was a very, very strong point to build to their match just a few days later at the Chi-Town Rumble. And then obviously the other big thing that stands out to me is the main event. So I kind of have issues with the way things were handled, but I don't because it's wrestling. So the main event is supposed to be the Varsity Club, or no, I'm sorry, the Road Warriors and Genichiro, is it Tenryu?
Yep.
Genichiro Tenryu. So it's supposed to be those three against Michael P.S. Hayes, Sting, and oh God, who am I forgetting? Help me out here, bully. Is
it another? Is it another Freebird?
No, I didn't think so.
Oh, I can't. Go ahead. We'll figure it out. Don't worry.
Kevin Sullivan comes in when they're doing their interview piece right before the match. They go off into this little caged area for some strange reason, and Kevin Sullivan sneaks in and locks the cage. So without any official comments, the match suddenly becomes the Road Warriors and Tenryu against the Varsity Club, Rotunda, Sullivan, and Steve Williams. And it was just a brawl, the match itself. But really, the most memorable part of that whole match is Sting and company breaking out of the cage, charging into the ring, and then it was just utter chaos throughout the whole rest of the night. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Jim Ross tossed to the last commercial break while the scrum, the battle was going on, and they came back, and it was still going on in the background, and they're like, "We're out of time."
Oh, I love. Can't remember who called that with him, but I know on the ones him and Shivani on 17 are great, but Ross is just selling that product, because he wore so many hats for both WWF and WCW when he worked there, and just he's a fan, loves the announcer, and just his one-liners and some of the stuff he says, just going crazy over things. Oh, it makes you love it even more. And you mentioned a name, and a guy that I really didn't appreciate growing up, but as I grow older, I'm appreciating him more and more. And that's maybe because one thing I think AEW is doing right is they book Sting really well. And Sting, Sting I think is one of the most underappreciated wrestlers in history. I know once upon a time I said he was overrated, but I've taken that back, because watch these reactions when Sting comes out. I mean, they're like John Cena reactions. And I'm talking John Cena when the crowd loved him. I mean, they're going nuts for Sting. They love Sting. They always have, and we can talk about Sting later down the road, with the whole NWO storyline, but Sting is their guy, and it never fails. When he is out there, the crowd is going crazy.
Oh, for sure. And I've always been a fan of Sting. The biggest thing that sticks out for me with Sting is not just his in-ring work and his how over he is, whether it's in WCW, whether it's in AEW, or even like WWE when he was there. I'm a big fan of Tony Schiavone. I've always thought his commentary is great. Not as great as JR, but up there. And I just freak out. I absolutely love when Sting comes out and Tony Schiavone it's Sting!
I do too. That's always been one of those things for me where it's over the top now. But the other night when he came out of the coffin during the match of Darby Allin, I love it. It's one of my favorite moments every week. I don't care if it's cliche or corny. It's one of the things I tune in for.
I completely can agree with that. It's Tony Schiavone's reaction to Sting, because it's so over the top, just gets me every single time.
Oh, I know.
I did look back. Partner was Junkyard Dog.
Okay. Yep.
So it's Hayes, JYD, and Sting. Sorry, I wanted to make sure we.
And they one time that odd incarnation, they were the 6-man champs at one time.
And that is such a strange pairing of 3 men that you wouldn't think would go together for the world. I mean, Junkyard Dog and Sting alone, and throw in Michael Hayes and his flamboyance. That's just a bizarre combination. But I can see
it's a pretty random group.
It's like they threw names in a hat and said, "Who can we pair as a trio?" Oh, okay, Sting. Oh, look, it's Michael Hayes. Let's draw one more name. JYD, why not? Let's just see who else we can add to the mix. We'll just draw names like random.
I don't know the origin story, but you almost feel like it's one of those things where, hey, not everybody made it to town from the trip the night before, and they kind of had to condense who was there. I don't know. It's kind of just an odd pairing, and when you see those in wrestling, they're fun to talk about, and that's definitely one of them. I'm glad you found that it was JYD. But I wanted to get back to what you were talking about with Five. We just got off on a tangent with Sting. That could be a show in and of itself. File that one away under S for Sting for shows in the future. That could be a show in and of itself.
Absolutely, I agree. But yeah, my take on Five overall, there's a lot of great. So the Varsity Club actually pulled double duty that night because uh, they were defending the NWA US Tag Champs, Mike Rotunda and Steve Williams. Then they came back and wanted a piece of the Trios title later in the night. So that kudos to them. I love whenever someone has the ability to work 2 matches, 3 matches on the same card, because it just shows their wrestling prowess, their longevity, and their ability to hold their own throughout the night.
Sure, reliable people that can do multiple matches. Those are very valuable to your company, and those are guys. Mike Rotunda, Hall of Famer, for sure. And who was the other man? Dr. Death Steve Williams, the late great Dr. Death Steve Williams, a natural wrestler and worked well in the ring. So, yeah, guys you could depend on and work and go out there and work multiple matches are valuable to a match, and those two are definitely in that category.
Absolutely, and that I thought that was amazing. I want to get back to you talking about JR though, because one thing watching the 4 clashes that I did, that I've always been a huge fan of Jim Ross and his call, whether it's with Gordon Soley, whether it's with Tony Schiavone, or even one of them, I think it was 5 with Magnum TA. I think I texted you one of my favorite lines earlier in the day from Jim Ross. So Lex Luger at one point brings out a chair, and JR goes, "They're moving furniture." His one-liners, and I'm not looking forward to the later clashes without Jim Ross on the call.
Yeah, that just means there's going to be more Schiavone to step in. I hear you. I love his one-liners. Did you ever know what a solar plexus was before Jim Ross mentioned it in a match? I don't think I ever knew what a solar plexus was. And there was a match on Clash 17 where he said it like 3 times in 10 seconds. And I'm like, I got to write that down because I never heard the term solar plexus before Jim Ross said it. And I love it.
I agree. Yeah, I would never have known what it was without Jim Ross. There's a lot of things that I think we wouldn't know without Jim Ross and his famous one-liners or words. We could have a whole show on Jim Ross too. So put a pin in that. Just hearing him on the call always makes me happy.
Yeah, it's nostalgia. It's a voice of our youth still with us as we grow old and he grows older. And seeing him, a fresh-faced Jim Ross, before the Bell's palsy hit him, before he had his stroke, when he was younger, it's good. It's good to see him, and that passion that he hasn't changed. And you can see that back then, man, he loved it then, and he probably loves it more now. But man, the things that not just Jim Ross, but the thing that makes those things special, I think, are the crowds. They're not in arenas that are overly big, and those crowds are going nuts.
Oh yeah, you look at any crowd from any clash that I've watched, and they are just so into it, and everything is just means something to them. You can tell that they are there. They're what am I trying to say? So them being there and their energy only makes the matches better, which in turn makes the crowd happier and makes the crowd better, which again, cycling back, makes the matches even better. The crowd and the wrestlers feed off of each other, and it's done so well at the 4 clashes that I've watched, because you're not seeing the same stuff week in and week out. That's one of the things that the modern era has trouble with, is you see the same match 5 or 6 times down the road, sometimes even 5 or 6 weeks in a row. You don't have that with these older crowds. You see something new and fresh every time you go to the arena.
Right. Most of the country back then did not have cable. They'd be tape swapping, or reading about stuff in magazines. So these were kind of more of a big deal for sure. And being on the Superstation, they had cable, don't get me wrong, but the most of the country did not have cable back in 1988. That's for sure,
Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've talked about Clash 1, we've talked about Clash 5, and it doesn't matter what Clash you talk about. I love the cheesy graphics, the cheesy intro videos, the cheesy chyrons when they're coming to the ring. I love everything about it. I love the cheesy production. I love the stage that walks out to the ring. I love the WCW, what they did with their entrances, and I just love everything about the cheesiness involved with it.
What got me, you mentioned the graphics and everything, the before match stills where you've got the little circles in the early clashes of the people competing, and then after the match you've got the little circle of who won. It's just,
I know. I love
many
it.
little touches. You bring up a good point. You mentioned the walkway, the ramp to the ring. I think having the ramp elevated to the level of the ring, you don't see that very often in modern times. I think that adds an extra element for when they go outside the ring, because you've got this ramp.
Yep.
I don't remember which Clash it was off the top of my head that I was watching, but it had to be 17. I'm trying to think who it was, but I want to say it was the match with Johnny B. Bad. Johnny B. Bad threw, maybe it was Flying Brian. I'm trying to think who his opponent was.
Yes, he was fighting Flying Brian. That was for the WCW light heavyweight title. Wasn't the cruiserweight yet. It was the light heavyweight title,
which has its own weight class, which they talked about in the match too. I like that.
I did note that. I did note that as well. Love it. I love it.
And at one point, either Flying Brian or Johnny B. Bad threw the other off of that rampway onto the guardrail. That's an element you don't see because they're not in the ring. You're not seeing them thrown over the top rope. You're not seeing them hurled off of the apron. You're seeing them on the ramp, halfway between the ring and the entrance, being thrown into a guardrail there. I think that's a different dynamic that could be incorporated more nowadays in modern times, but you don't see it because I don't know. I don't know what the reasoning behind the elevated rampway versus the normal today rampway is, honestly.
Yeah, it could be production, could be preference. But AEW had the elevated rampway for a while, and then for their pay-per-views, they've went to this slanted video board thing, which is pretty cool. So they haven't had the elevated stage for a while. It might be just more of a traveling thing, and more so. But I like the elevated thing for 1990. I remember seeing it on a Clash for the first time, and I was just like, wow, never seen that before. Kind of a cool thing, So
it adds
Clash.
its own element.
Say that again, my friend.
It adds its own element to.
Oh, it's something. It's something else that you can use. It's another. It's another part of the stage. It's another part of the stage you can use. Clash 9. I believe it's called New Year's Knockout.
New York Knockout, I think.
New York Knockout. I'm sorry. I know it was it was very close to that. New York Knockout. Okay. And I'm not going to recount match by match. I'm just going to write down the things that stuck out to me. Clash 9, historically, we could put a dog tag on this. It is when Scott Steiner, in a backstage segment, names his move the Frankensteiner.
I caught that. I did.
It was never. I guess it was never referred to as the Frankensteiner before that, and it was a pretty big deal that he named it the Frankensteiner. The whole time, Rick Steiner is just annoying as hell in the background. Scott is actually trying to cut a promo. This is Scott when you could still understand him. And yeah, the Frankensteiner.
Birth of the Frankensteiner, right there, and it was November 15th, 1989, is from what I'm seeing in my notes.
There you go. Birth of the Frankensteiner. Match I really enjoyed. You had the Dynamic Dudes, which for those of you who don't know who the Dynamic Dudes are, Johnny Ace, John Laurinaitis, who was recently let go of his duties from WWE. He and Shane Douglas are the Dynamic Dudes. Their Dynamic Dudes are, for lack of a better term, two bleach blonde guys. They're tan, good-looking guys from California. They can do it all. I've seen them come out before throwing frisbees in the crowd, playing catch with a volleyball back and forth. Oh, man, you got to go back and look at some of these. They skateboarded to the ring for this particular match. But they're working heel. Would a skateboarder, they wouldn't show, I don't know. Anyways, they're working heel. The Midnight Express of Sweet Stan and beautiful Bobby Lane are managed by Jim Cornette here. They're face. But what I love is when Cornette goes with his racket spot, the pop from the crowd. Like the crowd was going for the cheating of the face, which I thought was kind of odd at the time, but I liked it. The crowd was definitely in the Midnight's back, in the Midnight's corner. And it was an entertaining match, despite the fact that John Laurinaitis was
in it. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that pairing, but I'm not a big fan of Johnny Ace. But I'll tell you, I like Shane Douglas a lot. I wish he had been a bigger name than he was, and it's not his fault. I don't think he didn't get a fair shake in a lot of the places where he went. The best place for him and where he shined the most was ECW. But I thought that match was fantastic. Based on what the commentary was saying, I don't think Jim Cornette was in anybody's corner for this one, because the way
you're right. You're right. You're right. He was sitting in a chair, idle, quote unquote, at ringside, and then made a move at the end. You're right. There was a build there, but that pop, the crowd, I think 99.99% of that crowd was for the Midnights. I don't think there was a Dynamics fan in the building except for Laurinaitis and Douglas. But yeah, that crowd popped, and it was just a moment that one small spot like that, and the crowd was wanting more. Just how thirsty the crowd was.
Oh, for sure. And to have a manager, a heel manager at that, be that much over when he does his shenanigans, that's amazing. He's got to be up there as one of the greatest managers of all time. Excuse me. Sorry, I don't know what my deal is. I'm really phlegmy today. So
it goes without saying. Cornette's impact on the Midnights and also the other teams he managed. Something else. He's a mastermind at the manager thing, and I think it goes without saying when you want to talk about managers as tag teams, he is definitely one of the best. You see a Dr. Death squash match. You do see the Steiners and the Skyscrapers. Rick and Scott against the Skyscrapers, who would be Sid Vicious and Dangerous Dan Spivey, who would later become Waylon Mercy in WWF. Just the size of those guys in that ring, I was just like, wow. And then, not to be topped, Doom, the team of Butch Reed and Ron Simmons, comes out against Road Warriors, and those four teams kind of have their matches, and their matches end in controversy, and they're pushing to be for them to be at Starrcade, and you got so much going on here. You got so much going on. They're building for a show, and we're not even halfway through the card yet.
No. And I like that you brought up Doom. I think they are severely underrated.
Oh, I love Doom. Love them.
Before they were unmasked. So, quote unquote, nobody knows this is Butch Reed and Ron Simmons, two of the best workers in the business, especially at that time. Fantastic. And they're this carnation of Doom. They're with Woman. I thought that's a good pairing as well. Great managerial skills on her part. I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly, at one time they were paired with Teddy Long, another great performer. I'm not going to pigeonhole into a manager because he has had so many roles: referee, GM, manager. But Doom is fantastic and always has been and will always have special place for me as one of those great tag teams of the late 80s, early 90s.
Man, I love Doom too. I love the fact that Doom's got masks on, okay? Ron Simmons and Butch Reed are two of probably four of the African-American fellows working in the company. And there's no other two in the company that look like those guys. Those guys are chiseled from stone. When they get unmasked, they're like, I can't believe it. Like, what can't you believe? But that's the thing we always got to tell ourselves with wrestling. CZ, that's the thing we always got to tell ourselves. Right, wrong, and different, whether you're happy, sad, or pissed off, we have to suspend disbelief, correct? That's part of the deal, right?
Correct. That's the whole package of wrestling is
when you pass go, you get your $200 and you have to suspend disbelief. Because if you don't suspend disbelief, you don't get that $200. You know what I mean? So yeah, you have to expect a yes going in.
I mean, you mentioned the unmasking of Doom and the reaction there. I equate that to several years later, a decade or so later, the unmasking of Mr. America or Mr. USA, I don't remember which, but who was obviously a masked Hulk Hogan.
Wait, it was?
No, did I spoil it for you? I'm sorry.
I think it was Mr. America. He teamed with Edge to win like the tag titles, did he not? Like on the 4th of July?
Yes.
Yeah. The worst mask job. I mean, guy with bleach blonde hair hanging out the back of the mask. Guy with a bleach blonde Fu Manchu. I mean, he could have wore a different Lucha Libre mask to cover that up, to make it a little more surprised. Nah, why not? Oh, dude, yeah. It's right up there. Mr. America's unmasking and Doom's about right up there on suspense for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back to 9. A good match between Pillman and Luger. Luger's the champion, U.S. champion. Cheats to keep the belt. We get an appearance from Sting, which builds for their feud. Because of Starrcade, you're going to get Sting, Luger, Muta, and Flair in a round robin 4-way, just like they're doing the round robin 4-way with the tag team with Starrcade '89. But the icing on the cake of Starrcade '89 is Flair Funk. The I Quit match. Flair is in his 6th reign as your world's heavyweight champion. Funk is in great shape. This would have been 1990 Clash 17. I don't know the date off the top of my head. 1989. Yep. Funk looks great. Yeah, you're right. It's going to Starrcade '89 here. Funk looks great. So the angles I Quit. Nothing, no pinfall, submission. It's just getting your guy to say, I quit on the microphone. And if you want to see an I Quit match with a great story told and about every element involved, this is the one to watch.
Oh, I could not agree more. And I think I told you this off air in text message. The thing that really got me the most, nowadays you see an I Quit match, or even you put a Flair in an I Quit match, and you think, okay, no disqualification. Someone has to say the words I quit. Somebody's going to be bleeding tonight. This, throwing back to our conversation about Moxley and Jericho, this is a match that did not need blood, and they did not spill any, and it still told one of the best stories of that era.
I mean, and Flair, famous for blading, always having the red face and the bloody hair. Mm-hmm. Flair does a blade. It's amazing. And the crowd doesn't crap on the match for him not bleeding. I mean, it is such a good match. I urge anyone to go back and watch it. If you're into star ratings, I believe Big Dave gave it 5 stars. But for a match that was on cable TV, phenomenal match. I encourage you guys to go watch it. Those guys, they're both working stiff. They're both pros. two of the best. Flair, obviously the greatest of all time, and Funk, who is the greatest of what I would call that death match, back alley brawler, type of wrestling. Very accomplished wrestler too, but man, Funk and Flair deliver on this. If you're ever got a few minutes to go back and watch something, go watch Clash 9, Flair, Funk, I Quit.
Fantastic match all around. Went about 20 minutes, a little less than. And of course, building to Starrcade at the end of the match. Well, first of all, it's a match going into it. You mentioned Funk being top of your list for deathmatch type wrestling. Never in a million years would you expect Terry Funk to say "I quit." And
Right.
Flair goes over in the match. The moment that got me right before the end of the night shenanigans, Flair and Funk shake hands briefly. Great sign of respect. I thought that was well needed. And overall, just a brilliant package of a match. I agree. If you're going to watch one match this week, go back and watch Clash 9, Funk versus Flair.
Going off what you said, as Flair is getting attacked by Muta, Jim Ross is screaming in the background, "The Japanese attack Flair! The Japanese attack Flair!" And I'm like, oh my. It's a big moment. Jim Ross went straight forward and got it. And
right for the jugular.
Flair getting jumped by the Japanese, just, you don't see it every day.
And you wouldn't hear something like that today either.
Yeah, you probably couldn't get away with that.
No.
And probably something you couldn't get away with, CZ, on free TV or on cable TV back then, are 5 title matches in one night. And that's where I'm looking at now with Clash 17. Clash 17 doesn't have a special name for it. Like, I think Clash 10 was Knoxville, USA. Maybe that's Clash 15. Anyways, this one doesn't have a name. But man, right out front, 5 title matches. They're pumping the 5 title matches out front. We got a championship, the WCW championship match. We got a U.S. title match. We got the light heavyweight match. We got the tag team match, and then we also have the TV title match. So 5 matches, and I'm gonna say some of the names on these cards, and these guys went on to be something big. You have an opening match of a lumberjack match, Wildfire Tommy Rich, who's now Thomas Rich, with Alexandria York, who would later go on to become Marlena, taking on Big Josh.
Yeah.
Taking on Big Josh in the lumberjack match for the opener.
All in all, good match, and you're seeing the star power of people who are going to come in their own as the 90s progress. So this was 91. November of 91, 2 years after the one we just talked about, Clash 9. And you're right, looking at the card, there is so many big names that are coming out of this match. Maybe not big names right now while you're watching this, but they're going to be huge in the business in the next few years. And the Marlena, Terry Reynolds, whatever you want to call her, right there in the first match. She's going to be huge when she comes over to WWE with Dustin Reynolds.
Oh, for sure. You're going to several names on this card. That was a lumberjack match. Good opener. Get the crowd ready. Then we get Firebreaker Chip. I don't know. This might be one of your favorites. You might have more background on Firebreaker Chip against Beautiful Bobby. It's Beautiful Bobby Eaton of the Midnight Express fame. Then we start seeing an angle starting, and that goes throughout the night. Sting is jumped by Luger.
Yeah.
And
it's big later in the card.
They're planting the seeds here. Sting has got to defend his U.S. title later. And you're going to come to find out here in a couple minutes why it's such a big deal. He's got to defend it. But Luger jumps him. sending him to the hospital, the emergency room, with a young.
I'm sorry, I got to stop you there. Medical facility.
Sorry, sending him to the medical facility with a young Eric Bischoff as the roving reporter in tow, keeping us updated throughout the night. So you got to stay tuned for that. After that, we get Diamond Stud, who you know is Scott Hall. He takes on Z-Man. Z-Man had just come over from WWF a few years prior, former member Tom Zink of the Strike Force, he and Tito Santana. So he was Z-Man in WCW. Decent match there. Get your first title match of the night, TV title match, Stunning Steve, Stone Cold Steve Austin with blonde hair and a ponytail versus PM News. And that's where I heard solar plexus 3 times in 10 seconds. And I'm like, yeah, that's a Jim Ross thing. Then we get, go ahead.
No, it's so weird knowing who he becomes. Bald-headed badass to see Stone Cold with long blonde hair in a ponytail. I know that's who he was, but still going back and knowing who he becomes, it's strange seeing that.
Oh, for sure. And you can say that for this next guy too. Cactus Jack is in the next match. And Cactus Jack is channeling his earlier Mankind here in this match with the squealing and the screaming like a pig every time he's got an opponent in a chokehold or a hold like that. That's going on. And as you find out, he's taking on Van Hammer. And I posed this question to a friend and I did not get an answer. If you notice the Van Hammer entrance, it's like a music video before he comes out. It'd be kind of like a Titantron today. Is he the first wrestler to have a quote-unquote Titantron?
That is a great question. And I think we need to do some research on that. He might very well
We'll have an answer. We'll have an answer by the next time we're on here because I saw it. It's cheesy, early 90s rock, slow-mo, hair blowing. Van Hammer before he got too deep into the drugs against Cactus Jack here. And Jack beats him, gives him his first loss, which was, the crowd was shocked. But the outsider definitely wasn't.
What blew me away is
go ahead.
How over the crowd was for Van Hammer.
Oh my God, they loved him.
Van Hammer chant throughout most of that match.
They loved him. They loved him, and they also loved Johnny B. Bad. If you want to, we'll talk about that a little bit. Well, at least the ladies did. Now we get another Eric Bischoff Sting update, and this is from the ER. He said he's getting a thumbs up from the doctor on the inside, and he's waiting for an update from one of the orderlies. I love that term, by the way, orderlies. In this day and age, they would be kicking Eric Bischoff off the property. And HIPAA laws would, be waiting to be filed. But regardless, I love it. He gives us an update. And then we go into what is a personal favorite, one of my all-time favorite tag team matches. This is a great, fun tag team match with a hot crowd. Your current tag champs are Dusty Rhodes and Barry Windham. Or no, excuse me. They're the challengers. Right before Halloween Havoc, the current champs, the Enforcers, Larry Zbyszko and Arn Anderson, break Wyndham's arm, eliminating the threat of the tag team. Rhodes comes out with Wyndham, and Wyndham announces his new partner. Have you seen this part yet?
Oh yeah,
This was. It is about as hokey as it can get, but it's awesome. A guy dressed with a big dragon mask and veiled in black comes walking down the entranceway. And this is one of those, how much would that dragon mask now cost at one of those spirit stores, CZ? That thing would have to go for like $400 now, right?
Yeah.
That thing is massive. It's giant. It is over the top, okay? Everyone and their dog knows who it is at home. You're screaming at the screen. You know who it is. Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone, man, they are just trying to sell you. They're trying to sell ice to an Eskimo at this point. They're trying to sell ice to an Eskimo. Everybody knows who it is. Mask comes off, looks up, and the crowd pops, even knowing who it is. And they're nuts. They're nuts anyways for this match because they love the Dustin Rhodes, good-looking blonde guy. It's Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Have you ever known anybody? It's not a young Daniel or Brian Danielson. It's Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Crowd is nuts.
That'd be a very, very young Brian Danielson if it was.
Yes, absolutely. Saying the crowd is nuts or hot for this match is underrated. They are on their feet and screaming the whole time. One of my favorite tag team matches. This was your match of the card?
Hands down.
I'm so glad you loved it, dude. This is one of my all-time.
There's a lot going on, but this one is the one.
This is one of my all-time favorite tag team matches. And someday when we do a show about tag team matches, we'll revisit this. This is one of my all-time favorite tag team matches. 4 good wrestlers, and the crowd was going ape. I'm telling you, the only person who gets a bigger pop is Sting than this match, and that's for different reasons.
Yeah.
The Enforcers drop the belts here to Rhodes and Steamboat. The crowd is even happier, going crazy. Their heroes have conquered the nasty team of Zbyszko and Arn Anderson. After the match, we get a video package teasing the aforementioned Jushin Thunder Liger CZ, and I thought that was really cool footage from Japan.
Oh, I agree. I think bringing him in now, showing that video package, you couldn't have given him a better introduction than what they did.
Right, and that was a big deal to have a video package of a guy coming in back then because a lot of people didn't know who he was. The regular wrestling fan didn't know who he was, so seeing that ahead of time is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it's not like today where you have the internet and you can see, oh, this guy's really big in Japan, they should bring him over here. Or this guy's really big in pick an indie promotion, GCW, which is bigger than just an indie promotion, but that's the first one that came to my head. This guy's really big over here. They should bring him in on this roster.
Oh,
you
for
don't
sure.
have that back in the early 90s.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It is a big point for him to come over. It's not like you see now where you see somebody come over for 3 weeks and do a few shows and get back. It was a big deal for them to send him over here. And I know he has a series of matches with Pillman that are unbelievable. I mean, anybody who Liger worked with just excelled because Sid Liger was one of the easiest to work with in the ring. But we'll talk about Jushin Thunder Liger another time. Just wanted to mention this video package. We go back to ringside with Paul E. Dangerously, and he has found a loophole in this contract match tonight, in this contract with Sting and Ravishing Rick Rude for the U.S. title. If Sting is not in the building and not there for the match, the belt will be rewarded to Rick Rude. And Jim Ross can't believe that Paul Heyman has scooped the system once again and is going to stick it to the man, and the cards are stacked against Sting even more. I love everything about this. Everything about this is great. Light heavyweight match between Johnny B. Bad, a.k.a. Mark Merrill, against Flying Brian Pillman. You have to be 236 or less to be a light heavyweight, to be considered a light heavyweight. I guess this would be like the equivalent of what the junior heavyweights overseas, but it's a light heavyweight here. Decent back and forth match between the athletic B. Bad and Flying Brian. Flying Brian gets the win. Now it's U.S. title time. Rick Rude's in the ring. Rick Rude has the most badass airbrush tights of all time. The younger generation is going to say Rob Van Dam, but it's Rick Rude. He's got the U.S. title airbrushed already on his tights. He's got Clash of Champions on his tights. He looks like $1 million. That guy is $1 million. He was legit tough, a badass, and well respected. He's in the ring. And Paul E is pleading, Sting is not here. He's not here. And this is pre-OJ, CZ. So we get like a live shot of an ambulance returning from the medical facility. And we see Sting hobble out of the ambulance, selling that E injury from earlier. And he's trying to beat the count to get to the ring. Love the wholesome, cheesy moment as Sting rounds the corner, and there's the face locker room cheering him on. Go get him, Sting! Love it. It's so cheesy. I love it. I probably would have hated it at the time, but I love it. Sting gets in. These guys have an athletic match. Rick Rude is just tossing Sting pillar from post, capitalizing on the knee injury. Sting doing a great job of selling the knee injury. Good match. And then what do? Rude goes for the Rude Awakening. Sting muscles out of it.
Yeah.
Back and forth some more. It's getting time for Des. Rude's trying everything. Paul E distracted by Sting. Rude chop blocks Sting. Rolls him up, grabs the tights. We've got a new U.S. champ. That crowd was so upset afterwards. So hot. I wish you could bottle that up and put it into a can.
Victim of the most dangerous move in the most deadly move in professional wrestling, the surprise roll up.
Yeah, for sure. According to Bryan Danielson, the small package, right?
Yep.
The most dangerous move. And then you're right. You talk about it just seems the show seems anticlimactic after Sting makes the 10 count to me. And in fact, Sting Rude probably should have been the main event because the main event of Luger, Rick Steiner. Raise your hand if you actually thought Rick Steiner had a chance to win that match. Yeah, me neither. So that should have been second to last, but I get it. It's your championship. It's set up a DQ to go on to the next show. But I really love Clash 17. I don't think there's any 5-star matches on this card if that's what you're seeking in wrestling. But if you're seeking all kinds of different things, from tag team action to title matches to a lumberjack match, all that sort, this is the show for you. I think this is my all-time favorite Clash of the Clashes I've seen. It might get derailed at some point, dethroned. The Clash 17 is my favorite, and someday, a year from now, we go down the road and do a tag team match show. I guarantee you, the Enforcers versus Rhodes and Steamboat will be on that show.
Absolutely, that was such a great match.
That's all the notes I have for 17. My last note here is this. I said, you can watch them chronologically. You don't have to watch them if you don't want to, but take my recommendation and skip around on them. You're going to find something you like. You're going to see a guy that's like, that guy was a pro wrestler in 1990. He wouldn't be on even AEW Dark or Dark Elevation today. So it's fun to go down memory road. I love the cheesiness of the storylines. When I say cheesiness, I'm not ripping it. I'm loving it. The graphics and everything, the production, the excitement. This show has it all. That's what I like in watching these old shows, and this show definitely delivers. I love Clash 17.
I agree. I thought it was brilliant. It's arguably the best overall show of what I've watched. I'd say match-wise, my favorite match of the 4 that I've watched would still have to. I'd have to go back to Sting and Flair. But
for sure.
As an all-around show was just amazing.
Well, we have talked about Battle on the Belts and Clash of the Champions for quite some time now.
We're a little
What is on the horizon? What is on the horizon, oh Wizard, when you look into your ball?
So we have a fun few weeks planned. 2 weeks from now, we're going to be going down the rabbit hole back in time to 1992 SummerSlam. And the reason we're doing that is because it was the last time there was a stadium show in the UK. It's been 30 years, and that is our prep up for Clash at the Castle, which we will talk about the following week. But next week, this is going to be one of my favorite episodes, I think, so far. because we're doing something special.
Hey. Uh-oh.
So I know what I'm hoping for, and I'll get to that in just a moment, but I'm not going to decide the topic we're going to talk about to an extent. We're going to do what a lot of wrestling podcasts and a lot of people you know who are into wrestling do. We're going to talk about our Mount Rushmore of wrestling, but I've got 6 different topics for you. It's going to be either singles faces, singles heels, managers, women wrestlers, tag teams, or factions. And like I said, I'm not going to decide. I've got the wheelofnames.com pulled up with those 6 topics. We're going to spin the wheel and make a deal, as they say in old school WCW, and see what we get. All right. So, yeah, not what I was hoping for. I'll be perfectly honest. I was hoping it was going to land on managers, but I'm still happy with this. You're going to be even more happy because this is right in your wheelhouse. Next week, we are going to list our Mount Rushmore of tag team wrestlers.
Oh, goodness gracious, dude. Mount Rushmore of tag teams.
I see a lot of
man, I can't wait. I can't wait.
I'm going to have to give a lot of thought to that because there are a lot of great teams out there. I'm excited. I look forward to jumping in next week, giving this a go, and talking about our top tag teams.
Dude, I'm looking forward to it. I think I'm already doing show prep as we sit here and finish out this show.
I'm definitely with you. So we're going to put a bow on this episode. I just want to plug that the Card Subject to Change podcast is brought to you by the For Frequency's Sake Podcast Network. As always, I'm the Wizard CZ, and you can find me at the Wizard CZ on Twitter. You can find my tag team partner, Nick Bull, at Nick Bull 55, the show, CSTC Podcast on Twitter. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.